Okay.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. About half of all U.S. workers are employed by small businesses. What does the stimulus package mean for them? Scott Baxter is CEO of his own high-end architectural company. Scott, thanks for joining us. You say this plan is a disaster for small business. How come?
It doesn't do anything for us. The problem is not small business generates, as you may know, generates more jobs per year than large business does. 55% of the population works for small businesses.
So what do you want? What would you like to see?
What would I like to see?
Yeah.
A less complex system. I spend...
so what does that mean? A simpler tax code? Would you like to see? I mean, we're interested in this. What do you want?
Yeah, less taxes. I hate these programs where you're going to give me a short-term stimulus without the long-term benefit of it.
It's got to be permanent.
It's got to be permanent.
Okay.
Exactly. You're going to... the concept that we're going to attract investors like myself and others because you're going to save some tax money next year by accelerating expense write-offs.
Okay.
It's ridiculous.
Scott, we love your ideas. We're going to bring Maxine Waters back in and see how she feels about your ideas.
Wait a minute,
We're going to get it done. Yes. Representative Waters, what do you think about that? What do you think about Scott?
Small business talking to you. Small business of America.
Just a moment. Let me just say this. He says he wants to have assistance and monies for small businesses. There's a lot of money in here. When you look at a highway project, much of that's done by contractors, private contractors who have small businesses and medium-sized businesses. That's going to create more jobs and put more money back into the community. When you look at the transit projects, many of those are small businesses. These are not government people.
So we're gonna have trickle-down government. Is basically what you're proposing.
Hang on, let Scott respond.
I'm not, by the way, I'm not advocating either side, from a political perspective, but I can tell you this, okay, the concept of trickling down to small business is ridiculous. It cost me 45% more to navigate bureaucracy per employee than a large company does. I generate 78% of the new jobs in America every year. Okay, and you're going to start telling me that I'm going to get the benefit out of infrastructure projects that, by the way, are impossible to navigate too. Small companies don't have the infrastructure to create a division specifically to sell to the government because the complexity of selling to the government is crazy.
Well, Scott, I want to take a step back really quickly because in the House Republican counterproposal, there is a part of it specifically that speaks to small business. But give the two members of Congress some insight into what's going on in your world right now. And specifically, how is your access to credit? How are your day-to-day operations going? And what are your problems?
Okay, the problems are complexity. You give me these programs, and we're involved in government programs.
No, but what about your day-to-day business, your actual business?
Yeah, the actual business, small businesses, especially startups. I happen to be just a 2-year-old business. We've never had access to debt, by the way. So we have to rely on our own finances, our own personal credit lines, and perhaps the venture community if we can attract them, which they're really not interested in investing these days. You can just take a look at the numbers. The investment coming from that community has dropped significantly in the last year. So, at the end of the day, it costs more to operate a small company per employee than it does other employees. We simply don't have access, to the...
Representative Barrett, I just want to bring you in on this, give you a chance to respond to what Scott is saying here. It sounds like he's talking about tax simplification as well as bureaucratic simplification being some way that would seriously stimulate his business.
Absolutely, and that's been my point, and I think that's been the Republican point the whole time. When we think about this spending bill, this $819 billion, it's going to grow the federal government. It's going to create government sector jobs. This is not what the small businessman needs. He needs security and he needs surety in the tax code. And what we're giving him right now is, well, we're going to spend this money. We may have to raise your taxes. We may not.
But whatever you do, do not make it complex. I've spent, okay, over hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a startup in the last 2 years in legal and accounting fees just to navigate the system. Now I happen to come from a background where I'm able to navigate that and I'm able to afford it because I've had previous success in other ventures. And this one's being successful as well. But, explain to me why it cost me $60,000 or $70,000 just to do my taxes for a business, okay, that just turned a profit for the first time in the fourth quarter of this past year.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean,
so whatever you do,
let me just
do
add
not
one
give
quick
us
thing
programs.
here. I want to give Congressman Waters the last word, if you could make it very short here. But it is worth mentioning, though, that one of the reasons the government would spend here to help the economy, and with all of Scott's problems, I don't mean to minimize those, but the reason the government would spend is because private business is not spending, and it's a temporary bridge to the return of the private sector to investment. Congressman Waters.
This is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which means some is short-term and some is long-term. We're investing in the future. We can't just sit on our hands going through this recession and let it fall into a depression. We've got to be active. We've got to do something. This something that we're doing is going to stimulate the economy. I'm sorry that the gentleman cannot deal with the cost of doing business. There is a cost involved. You do have to have an investment in your small business. Your overhead costs are real.
But government's the one.
In his business and not in the government. But I think we got to leave it there,
government's
guys.
the one that's raising his costs.
No,
I've been doing this for 20 years successfully. I know a lot about
this. In order to have a business, you've got to pay your overhead.
I think
you've got to have an investment.
Not when it's 45% higher
guys, we got to leave
most
it there.
people.
Well, this is going to be good for
us.
America. We're going to create jobs and stimulate this economy.
This is a key issue. Everybody needs to listen to Scott. Scott's the guy who's going to make the jobs.
That's exactly right.
That's what's important.
Scott, thanks for joining us. And Representative Barron Waters, thank you for sticking around and addressing his questions as well. We really do appreciate that, Brian.
Now, beyond the stimulus package, President